بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد. So today inshallah ta'ala we'll finish what we started last week of the summary of the modern issues or doubts regarding the issues of Tawheed and Shirk, and also a summary of the book Durr al-Nadid of Alam al-Shawkani. And we're talking about last week towards the end some of the major doubts that they have, the people of innovation, the grave worshippers, and those who have confused Tawheed with Shirk or Shirk with Tawheed, and they're trying to create those doubts. We stopped in the discussion of the categorical fallacies that they fall into. And I want to finish with some of those common doubts, and then I want to move into the last issue, which has to do with how these doubts relate to the da'wah of Shaykh al-Islam Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab rahimahullah, and the ulama of Najd and all the Salafis in general. So we said that the people who do fall into grave worship, they fall into many fallacies, many mistakes in their understanding. And one of them is the categorical fallacy, when they take one issue and they confuse it with another. So they'll take an issue like dua and mas'ala, asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or the creation. Right? Dua and mas'ala, you're asking Allah for something you need, or dua and mas'ala, we're asking the creation for something you need. And they confuse it with dua al-ibadah, the dua of ibadah, when you do an act of worship in order to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, fearing Him, loving Him, hoping from Him. So an example we said was that the people who fall into shirk, they confuse dua and mas'ala with dua al-ibadah, claiming that dua and mas'ala is allowed with its conditions, but in reality they engage in dua al-ibadah. So they say things like, when we go to the graves, we're not doing dua that the Quraysh were doing. The Quraysh said, "Ma na'buduhum." They were doing ibadah, dua al-ibadah. Us, we're doing dua al-mas'ala. We're asking the dead to ask Allah, or we're asking the dead due to their status, whatever it may be. But in reality, we notice that they don't fulfill either of them. They're not doing dua al-mas'ala the right way, because they're asking the dead, and the dead cannot help them. And many of them also do dua al-ibadah. So they're going to the grave and they're doing ibadat. Some of them are slaughtering there, some of them are doing nadhr, vows, etc. So in reality, they do exactly what the Quraysh did. Whether they call it dua al-mas'ala or ibadah, they're not doing either. They're falling into the shirk fi dua al-mas'ala and shirk in dua al-ibadah. So it's important to know this, because when they discuss things with you, they say chapter 39 verse 3, where the Quraysh were claiming that they were drawing nearer to their idols, we're not doing what they did. But in reality they are, because they're doing both types of ibadah. Another thing we said is they confuse tawassul, which is shirki, i.e. istighatha, seeking the help in the time of distress from the dead, with tawassul al-bid'i. And we said that this is a difference between the two. When you're asking Allah, but in an innovative manner, it's called tawassul al-bid'i, an innovative version of tawassul. But what they will do is that they will say that tawassul bid'i, like asking people or asking Allah through the status of an individual or his essence, there's a difference of opinion about it amongst the scholars, and they'll use that to get away from dua, from the tawassul al-shirki or istighath al-ghayrillah that they're doing. So when you tell them what are you doing with shirk, they'll say this is ikhtilaf. How? Then they go to tawassul al-bid'i. But you tell them you're not doing tawassul al-bid'i, you're doing al-istighath al-ghayrillah, tawassul al-shirki. So that's a categorical fallacy, because if they were able to make a debate in tawassul al-bid'i, then they can confuse you as a smokescreen that there's ikhtilaf, and why are you being so strict? But we're telling them there's ikhtilaf in tawassul al-shirki, istighath al-ghayrillah. That's why we have to pay attention to definitions. Another thing that they do is that they confuse al-ibadah al-mahdha with ibadah al-mushtaraka or muhtamala. And this is a very important one, because we're going to take a look now at Yasir Ghadi, his recent view and his position, which is exactly this. Al-ibadah mahdha or ibadat, acts of worship which are purely and can only be done as acts of worship. And the ulama, they use this terminology, al-ibadah al-mahdha. Mahdha means pure worship. It cannot be done except as worship. Example, salah. There's no such thing as salah, which is a mubah or al-aada. Salah is always ibadah. So let's say, for example, now someone goes to the grave and is praying salah towards them for their sake, to draw nearer to them. This is shirk. Compare that to an ibadah, which in its origin is mushtaraka. It can be done in two ways. And the classic example is sujood. And this is the exact example Yasir Ghadi he uses. Sujood has two ways of doing it. Both of them are impermissible, but one is shirk and one is haram. Making sujood to a person who's alive as a form of greeting is haram. In the past Sharia was permissible. The story of Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam. In our ummah, making sujood to people as a tahiyyah is haram. But if someone makes sujood to someone who's alive as a form of taqarrub, to get closer to them, then they did ibadah. This is shirk. So the reason I'm mentioning this kind of ibadah, it has more than one version. One version which is haram, one version which is ibadah. Another example, khawf, fear. Fear is categories. Fear which is tabi'i, normal or considered natural. Fear which is khawf al-sir, the fear belonging to Allah. So now, ibadat like this, since there's more than one way of doing it, the ruling may change. Yasir Ghadi and all those who follow this way, his teacher Hatim Aouni and all of them, they bring examples of ibadat like this. Ibadat which are fil asl mushtaraka or in the asl is muhtamala, there's more than one way, and say this is proof that niyyah counts. And we're asking you wrong example. You're talking about dua like this or ibadat like that. How about dua, ibadat mahda like salah and zakat? Is there such thing as zakat to other than Allah? Is there such thing as salat al-dhuhr to other than Allah? Nadhr li ghayri Allah? They'll tell you, won't use those examples. So now let's go and look at Yasir Ghadi exactly what he's doing today. In Epic channel, his YouTube channel, he had his long answer. And this is where his recent view is. I'm just going to summarize his views. Otherwise, it's on YouTube and the transcription I have in front of me. He says that his view now regarding these masail, he takes the second opinion, which is that evoking the saints is haram, and it's evil, and it's an evil innovation, a religious innovation, and a stepping stone to shirk. But it's not shirk in and of itself unless that action is accompanied by a belief that you're calling out to God or to Allah. So he's taking the view then, making any type of ibadah, whether dua al-mas'ala or dua al-ibadah, one of the two, doesn't matter. If you don't have the aqeedah, the belief that which you're calling to is an actual Allah, you don't believe in the rububiyyah of that which you're calling to, it's only haram, not shirk. But when you have that aqeedah, it becomes shirk. And now, this is the view, of course, of his teachers, right? This is where he got confused because he used to take the other view. And in order to support his view, he claims this is the view of many of the ulama today, or the madhahib, like the Maliki madhab. He says the Hanafi scholars, Shafi'i scholars of Egypt and Syria, they hold this view. Deobandis, Azhar University, etc., they hold these views. Now, what he's saying, as you can see, once he brings a view, he tries to bring the madhabs and the different views as if it's a permissible ikhtilaf. The first problem we notice is that the view he held 15 years ago, in which he used to promote and write his books on, was the view of Shaykh Sulayman Abdul Wahhab, as he mentioned in his book here, Sharh Kashf Shubuhat. Right? He takes the view of that before as the view of most ulama, that these are considered shirk akbar. Now he changed his view. And in order to support his view, he says there is many madhabs who hold this view. So the first problem we have, is it true that the Maliki madhab and the scholars of the Ahnaf or the Shafi'iyya are actually of this view? We're going to say it's not true. There's a dispute amongst them as well. So saying that it's the view of the madhab is not correct. And if anyone wants more, we can see the book I cited before. And there's another book called Bayan al-Shirk wa Wasaili عند علماء حنفية ومالكية وشافعية وحنابلة, written by one of the contemporary scholars, where he shows every madhab their actual stance on shirk. But irrelevant, what is his argument? His argument is, it's not shirk, it's only haram, but with an aqeedah it becomes shirk. Now he gives an example. He says that there must be an intention of worship. Why? Because actions are judged by intentions. And if you do not intend to worship other than Allah, then you cannot be held liable for worshiping other than Allah. إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ. It's very simple, very common logic. And then he gives the example of sajda and the example of asking his son or somebody to help him. So here, brothers and sisters, we have to pay attention to what he's doing. He's tricking the people because he's confusing dua, which is muhtamala, an act of worship like what? The example of sajda. How many versions of sajda are there? There's one version which is haram, one which is shirk. Both are not allowed. Because there's two versions, what differentiates a sajda to someone alive as a tahiyyah versus one which is ibadah is the niyyah. So he's using ibadat which are muhtamala as his grounds. Why didn't he use the example of zakat or salah? Because there's no such thing in the ulama as salat other than Allah, except the shirk. He's using examples like this for a reason. Another one, Al-Istiqama. Isti'ana is dua mas'ala. There's two versions, asking the creation or asking Allah. Why does he use this example? Because he's trying to show there's a difference. The niyyah counts, not just the ibadah. But the answer we're going to say here is that he's mixing between ibadat which are mahda, pure worship, and ibadat which are possible or conditional. And this is not by accident, brothers and sisters. He's not someone ignorant. He's doing it on purpose. So we must understand the difference. How are ibadat categorized? One category, ibadat, which are mahda, pure ibadat. They're only done as a form of ta'zeem, veneration lillahi subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you give that ibadat to Allah, for shirk akbar, irrelevant of your niyyah. And who said this? Whose views of this? Majority of the ulama. Right? They mentioned this. Right? Almost all of them, they mentioned this. Including the ulama of different madhahib, like Al-Qarafi, or Al-Zarkhashi Shafi'i, or other than them. So Yasir Qadi is not ignorant. He knows what he's doing. He's using examples which you and I can agree to, and then moving to other examples which he cannot prove. So to help us explain this, let's go back to the issue of sujood. Is sujood an ibadah which is mahda, pure? Scholars say that it depends what you're talking about. You're talking about making sujood to the creation when someone's alive as a form of greeting, then this is haram. And if someone is doing it to draw near to that creation, it becomes shirk. And how do we know that? The hadith of Mu'adh bin Jabal, when he came to Rasulullah, when he came back from Sham, and he made sujood to him, and Nabi said, Mu'adh, what are you doing? Then he explained to the people in Sham, do that to greet their honorable ones, I want to do it for you, and Nabi prohibit that. Here, Shaykh Islam ibn Taymiyyah says, see how that was considered haram, but the Nabi didn't say it was shirk because it was doing for tahiyyah. Another example, Adam, Iblis supposed to make sujood to Adam, out of tashrif, honor. طيب, if there's two types of sujood here, Yasir Qadi, why is he using this example? Because once he can explain to you niyyah counts, you can't say shirk happens when somebody goes to the grave and does something. Ask the person's intention. Ask him his aqeedah. And the problem with this, brothers and sisters, is that he skipped the examples which don't help him. And this is the way of Ahl Bid'ah. The way of Ahl Bid'ah, they will never bring an example that doesn't work with them. So let's give an example the ulama do mention. Let's give the example of Qira'at al-Quran, of adhkar, sadaqah, tatawwu', or salah. These ibadat are ibadat which are pure worship. Anytime you do them, you're engaged in worship. Therefore, your niyyah must be for Allah. If it's for other than Allah, you're drawing near to other than Allah, it becomes shirk akbar. Az-Zarkhashi, he writes, as well as Suyuti and also Qarafi, they all say, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ, this hadith of Umar, is for what? الْأَعْمَالِ الَّتِي تَارَةً طَاعَةً وَغَيْرَ طَاعَةً تَارَةً. It's talking about acts of worship. It sometimes can be worship and sometimes are not. Sometimes obedience, sometimes not. And how do we know? Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, like hijrah. Hijrah can be different types. For Allah, His Messenger, hijrah for your own purpose, dunya. So the hadith is telling us, the hijrah itself is ibadah, which is ibadah or ta'ah muhtamala. It's possible to go as ibadah, possible to do it for your own purpose. Why is this important? Yasir Qadi said, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ is for all ibadat. If you, for example, are doing slaughter, or you're reading Quran, or you're praying salah, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ. We say, no, that's wrong. And it's impossible, because once you engage in ibadah which is pure, as soon as you engage in it, فَهُوَ عِبَادِ لِغَيْرِ اللَّهِ or لِلَّهِ. There's no way out of it. So we have to understand what is happening here. It's confusing two types of ibadat. So the layperson will say, MashaAllah, as long as your niyyah is good, right? And he knows, because he's not ignorant, that example he gave is wrong. To give you another example, the Zarkhashi says, for example, things like qurubat, drawing near to Allah, like wudu and salah and zakat. A person, when they do these ibadat, some of the ibadat which are pure don't even need a niyyah. As soon as you do them, it's an ibadah. Like adhan, there's no such thing as an adhan but doing ibadah. So as soon as someone's making adhan, فَهُوَ ibadah, it's already ibadah, and the niyyah taqarrub is already there. You're already drawing near to something, either to Allah or other than Allah. Such the ulama, the fuqaha, they say you don't even need to have a niyyah. So I want to ask a question. Yasir Qadi said, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ is needed. When the ulama said their ibadat, you don't even need a niyyah. It's already taqarrub by the action. Brothers and sisters, why is he doing this? In order to create the argument. Here's the argument now. The only way to make sense of all of this, he says, is that you have to go back to person's intention. And what's the person's intention? Are you trying to draw near to Allah? So he says the best answer is to all of this is that if the person is drawing near to Allah, drawing near to Allah, then it's shirk. Otherwise, it can't be shirk. And this is a mistake, he says. A mistake of Shaykh Islam ibn Duhab, a mistake of the ulama who say it's shirk without niyyah. And that leads us to the point I'm going to get to at the end, which is what does he believe about Shaykh Islam ibn Duhab now? So the summary of this, some ibadat, by themselves, when you engage in them, you have to have a niyyah, and some of them you don't need to have a niyyah because the action itself is an ibadah which only be done drawing near to Allah. But the key we're trying to take from this, anytime you have an ibadah, they're all not the same category. Yasir Qadhi tried to group them together in order to confuse you. When he gave the examples that fit his ideology. He hid from the examples that don't. And this is dangerous because Ahlul Bid'ah, they will always do that. They will always do what's in their favor. And I want to conclude now with his last point, his words here. He says here, when he finishes talking about what is worship, what is not, he says that Ibn Abdul Wahhab would explicitly state that these evidences, what happened with the Quraysh, is happening today. And this is simply false. This is totally false. The Quraysh, when they worship their gods, they recognize them to be gods. And they recognize that what they're doing is worship. مَا نَعْبُدُهُمْ. They say, we don't worship them. This is considered worship. But no Muslim ever says, I'm worshipping the Prophet ﷺ, I'm worshipping Abdul Qadir Jilani, Ali, or others. In their mind, it is not worship. And if in their mind it's not worship, then it can't be considered worship. Again, who preceded him with this kind of ideology? Except that he has changed his views for other reasons, brothers and sisters, not for the haqq, as we'll see. It's actually for other reasons. طيب, so we can see that's a categorical fallacy where they mix between different types of ibadat, between one which is mahda, pure, and one which is muhtamala, possible, one that needs an intention differentiate, one that doesn't. And if somebody wants more on this, they can go back to certain books and they can read more about this. For example, the book of Zarqashi, Al-Manthur fi al-Qawa'id, volume 3, page 286 to 288, and also Al-Qarafi al-Maliki, which he claims he's following the Maliki madhab. Al-Qarafi says in his book Al-Umniyya fi Idrak al-Niyya, page 21, he mentions this point as well. And the reason I mention these different madhabs, because he claims these madhabs are with him. Qarafi, how big is he in the madhab Malikiyya? It's big. How about Zarqashi? These are the usulis of their madhab. I want to move on now, brothers and sisters, to what they also use of weak narrations. So that's another claim, argument they use. They bring da'if narrations. So we tell them that anything that's da'if, we don't need as proof. Example, to show that you can seek help from the dead, or that you can ask help from other than Allah, they tried to use the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam, asking the help of Jibreel when he was thrown in the fire. That qissa is da'ifa, it's a weak story, so it's not proof. The third error they make is qiyas ma'fariq. They use analogy, false analogy, between actions of worship which are not the same, or between the dead and the living. And we already explained this, but we're just going to remind us that the dead and the living are not the same. So what they do is they say, if you're allowed to ask the dead for help, if you can make isti'ana, you can seek help of the living, with certain conditions, why can't we seek the help of the dead? And the answer is, they're not the same. They're not the same. That's a qiyas, a false analogy. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells in the Quran, they're not the same. Right, so we have to pay attention to that point. If you go back to the Quran, you can see that. Chapter 35, verse 22, in fact, chapter 35, verse 14. They also try to make a qiyas between the creation and the creator, by saying, like, if you want to get to a king, you have to seek intermediaries to get to him. So likewise, we go through the awliya, because they're closer to Allah. Again, that's a qiyas, and making tashabbuh bayna khaliq wal makhluq. And this is absolutely haram, the asl of shirk. Another thing that they do, that they try to rely upon the linguistic definition, instead of going back to the legislative definitions. And this is another technique. Ahl Bid'ah, they use always ta'rifat, which are lughawi. They will not return back to ta'rifat al-shar'i. And we said this before, in usul al-fiqh, we have three definitions for something. Definition which is found in the sharia, definition which is found in language, and definition found in customs. Which one takes precedence? If we have multiple definitions, you always give definition of the sharia. Here, they will say tawassul. What does tawassul mean? In Arabic language, taking a wasila. What does tawassul mean for sharia? Al-ibadah. So why they define tawassul with its general linguistic meaning? When we have ta'rif shar'i, we have in the Quran and Sunnah, tawassul only means ibadah, or doing dua to Allah, or asking someone to make dua for you. So what they'll do is that they make tawassul definition linguistic, so it's become wide. So that you're doing shirk, what are you doing? فَبَتَغُوا إِلَيْهِ وَسِيلًا, I'm taking a wasila. That's not the wasila in the Quran. And they know this because linguistic definitions are always going to be connected to the legislative ones. But Ahlul Bid'ah, you notice, brothers and sisters, always they run to the linguistic definitions. This is their way out. Because if they can't get it, they're going to make one up. Right? Just like the istawa with istila and etc. Right? They always make up a new one. طيب. All of these mistakes I just mentioned, this is what the grave worshippers fall into. And the examples are many, but the reason I'm mentioning these mistakes, when you discuss with them, you don't have to argue with their hujaj. You just argue with the istidlalat, how they're making the argument. So if he brings you the story of Musa alayhi salam and Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam Mi'raj, qiyas ma' fariq. The qiyas with ghayb with the alim al-shahada, not going to work. I don't need to know what dalil you're using. It's false analogy. The analogy is wrong and the istidlal is batil. But today what happens, if we try to memorize every single shubha, you will run out of time. So if you know how they argue, it's easier. It saves you time. And now I want to finish by talking about how they went now, after they did all these mistakes, how they labeled the da'wah of Shaykh al-Islam, Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, rahimahullah, and the ulama Najdiyya, and all the ulama who are Salafi as being extremists. And this is what we want to finish with. Yasir Ghadi recently, he has written a book on Salafism. And in this book, he's parading, right? Going across the world, right? He's promoting this book. And he's talking about his new beliefs. And he mentions in there a chapter about takfir. And he says in here that the writings of Ibn Abdul Wahhab, however, are rife with accusations of takfir. In one of his early letters, he states that belief in the righteous persons, the saints, and other than them, is professed today is polytheism. And he brings examples. So he says the Wahhabis, or Ibn Abdul Wahhab, effectively excommunicated, i.e. made takfir, of the Muslim masses during his lifetime. Okay, this is his claim now. But when you go to Yasir Ghali's old writings, he doesn't have that same view. So we're going to see here some examples. Because either Yasir Ghali was ignorant before or he became ignorant now. One of the two. He says here, and some of these points, we're going to read some of his statements. Because it's important to know why is he changing his view now. It's for his favor, brothers and sisters, for his benefit. Page 188. So he says in here, one point to benefit to be derived from here is that the author is clearly freeing himself from the belief of the Khawarij and defending the companions' decision to fight them. When Abu Bakr and Umar and the Sahaba fought the people who didn't pay the zakat. This in itself is clear proof that the author did not consider himself from the Khawarij. How could he, when his whole call was the same as the companions? Yet perhaps the greatest slander that he and those who followed him were charged with was that they were a faction of the Khawarij. In reality, any person who makes such a claim is ignorant of the true beliefs of the Khawarij and the teachings of the author. Page 188, that's his own book. So either he was Jahil before, brothers, or Jahil today, one of the two. And it's clear that he's today became ignorant for other reasons. It's not Jahil, it's Tajahul. He's doing it on purpose. And why is this important? Shaykh Islam Abdul Wahhab, he was accused of being a Khariji by his own opponents. And we have to address this very quickly and very easily. The first thing we have to know, it's not the first time they say this. Anyone who's Salafi now who believes what we believe, that these are shirk, is a Khariji. That's what they're going to call you, or extremist. And how can we explain that this is not correct? Number one, Shaykh Islam Muhammad Wahhab rahimahullah is not like the Khawarij, as we'll see. His aqeedah is different. But if becoming a Khariji is making takfir of people, if this is what Khariji means, and it's wrong definition of Khawarij aslan, but if this is what Khawarij are, then the people at the time of Shaykh Islam were Khawarij themselves. Because his opponents made takfir of him. Pay attention. Az-Zini Dahlan, Muhammad ibn Afariq al-Hanbali, Abdullah ibn Musa, Ibn Fayruz, Uthman al-Basri, the Mufti al-Dawla Uthmaniyya at that time, all made takfir of Shaykh Islam. Khalas, they're Khawarij too then. It's important. If that's the standard. They made takfir of him before his da'wah became popular and after. Especially Ibn Afariq. You have to know this. He's his biggest opponent. He made takfir of him in the beginning of his da'wah and when he got later. So that's the first issue. Who's the Khariji here then? Next, if he's considered Khariji because he made takfir of people, the question should be, what was he making takfir of? In this case, Shaykh Islam Muhammad Wahhab, the biggest problem that his enemies had with him is that he made takfir of Muslims who said La ilaha illallah, but they didn't free themselves from the false deities. This is the asl. Because his enemies believed if you say La ilaha illallah, which means Tawheed al-Rubiyyah, then you're a Muslim no matter what. Shaykh Islam Muhammad Wahhab's argument is, if you're doing shirk, as you're a Muslim, you become a kafir. And the proof of it, Surah Baqarah, ayah 256, فَمَنْ يَكْفُرْ بِالطَّاغُوتِ Whoever disbelieves in the false deities, وَيُؤْمِن بِاللَّهِ. So what they were doing, they say, we believe in Allah. طيب, and then someone was doing shirk, they say, keep going, you're okay. So they defend the mushrikun, they say that these false deities are okay to worship. So Shaykh al-Islam is saying, you're no longer a Muslim if you don't fight against shirk. Because you can have the love of the false deities and love of Allah at the same time. من قال لا إله إلا الله وكفر بما يعبد من دون الله. خلاص. They said you can never become mushrik unless you do shirk fi tawheed rubiyyah. There's the asr, brothers and sisters. This is the debate. Shaykh Islam Muhammad Wahhab fought them on this ground, that they fell out of Islam because they did shirk akbar, either themselves or they defended those who did it. So this is important to understand, because then it became a political issue after that. So we have to understand this. Next, how do we know he's not from the Khawarij? Well, the ulama have written a lot. The best of what you're going to find, Sheikh Muhammad Hisham Tahiri, Hafidhullah Ta'ala, he has a PhD in Medina University, 1,125 pages between differences of the Khawarij and Sheikh Islam Abdul Wahab. From the best books written, brothers and sisters, a PDF, 1,125 pages. And who argue with him? Who's the people debating him? Sheikh Saud al-Khalaf and the Mufti Sheikh Abdul Aziz al-Sheikh. It's one of the best books on this topic. In there he shows, without doubt, for any way you look at it, he's not Khariji. That's a Qadi, brother and sister. He doesn't have that level of PhD. He's not that level. Yet somehow he found out that the Khawarij. How? What he says, because they made takfir, therefore they're Khariji. No. Just because you made takfir doesn't mean you're Khariji. What does it mean to be Khariji, brothers and sisters? Now we have to answer this question. What does it mean? And me and you have to know this. Anyone who says the ulama Najd or Khawarij, he doesn't know what Khawarij are. Because the Khawarij, why the Khawarij? Number one, they have a problem with mas'ala al-hukm wal-imama. So that's why for them the Khawarij, that's asl Tawheed, Tawheed al-Hakimiyyah, not Tawheed al-Ibadah. What's Shaykh Islam Abdul Wahab's da'wah? Tawheed al-Ibadah, laysa Khariji. Brothers and sisters, be with me. Khawarij today is not someone who does khuruj. We have to move away from that. That's not Khariji. Kharij is not someone who makes takfir. Someone who does takfir of the people بدون mukaffar, without which is not allowed to be takfir of. He's making takfir on something which doesn't make you out of Islam. But today someone says, oh, he killed somebody, for Khariji. So what's the difference between him and a gangster? Right? Or someone did khuruj. Okay, is it Bughat or Khawarij? You see, brothers and sisters, today, right now, if you go online, how many Muslims, they don't know that? They say, oh, if you do khuruj, you're Khariji. Ya akhi, that's not the definition. Khawarij or what? Number one, Tawheed Hakimiyyah, that's it. They make takfir mutlaqan hukm bighayri manzilillah. If you rule by Allah reveals mutlaqan, irrespective of your niyyah, فهو كافر. That's important. That's what they believe. ومن لم يحكم بغير ما أنزل الله بغير ما أنزل الله فهو كافرون. Kafirun, no matter what. ومن لم يحكم. They don't care if it's for fisq or no. So what is the second point? Khawarij make takfir بمطلق الحكم بغير ما أنزل الله. Anybody who rules by Allah reveals, irrespective of his intention or belief, هو kafir. Shaykh Islam Abdul Wahab, did he do that? No. He didn't make takfir of someone who doesn't pray salah, guys. I never heard a Khariji who's not going to make takfir of someone who's tariq salah. Doesn't get clearer than that. The hadith, right? Shaykh Islam said, no, someone doesn't even pray salah, he's still Muslim unless he did it out of juhud or other conditions where he goes into. Thirdly, Khawarij, what do they believe? They make takfir without looking at tahqiq al-shurut wa intifa mawani'. They don't care about shurut wa mawani', conditions and preventatives. So these are the three things different between Ahlul Sunnah and the Khawarij. Number one, the asl of Tawheed for the Khawarij, Tawheed al-Hakimiyyah, not Tawheed al-Ibadah. Number two, anyone who rules by Allah revealed, who is a kafir, irrespective. Number three, if you fall into kufr or shirk, you're a kafir. Doesn't matter if you have a preventative or a condition. Shaykh Islam Abdul Wahab didn't believe any of those. He didn't put laysa Khariji. How can someone today, brothers and sisters, claiming to be expert in Aqeedah is making these claims? He's not ignorant, brothers. He's doing it on purpose. He said before, they're not Khawarij. Today, he's saying they are. How do Qadi get to that? Let me give you the example now. He's going to bring you on his same book, this on Salafism, he brings a story of history. He's going to use Tariq. And I'm going to say something quickly. Why is he moving to Tariq? Why is he not using the aqwal, the statements of Shaykh al-Islam? Because the statements of Muhammad Wahab don't help him. So what he's going to do, change the goalpost. Pay attention. Ahl Bid'ah, they have a usloob. If they can't get you in your words, they're going to catch you in the actions. What kind of istidlal is that anyways? أفعال الناس, somebody's actions, is it hujjah? Hatta Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam, if he did something, we look at it to see what does the action intend, what is the meaning. So I'm saying this because in usul al-fiqh we have a chapter about af'al. وَالْأَفْعَالَ لَا عَمُومَ لَهُ. Actions don't have generality. Here we're going to take af'al al-bashar and make this aqeedah. وَاللَّازِمْ مِذْهَبْ لَيْسَ مِذْهَبْ. The entailments of someone's beliefs are not his beliefs. How could someone do that? Except somebody who's trying to find and clutching for straws. Because in this book he says, Shaykh Islam Abdul Wahab never made takfir of anyone without conditions and preventatives. But now, yes, said, I'm so intelligent, I'm so knowledgeable, I found a story. Fi Tariq. Okay, what's your story? The story of the people of Qasim. So if you go, let's read what he writes and let's read what really happened. He writes in his book, the clearest examples of takfir of Shaykh Islam Abdul Wahab did to his people is the people of Qasim. He said the people of Qasim, Muhammad Ibn Abdul Wahab wrote to them, saying that you guys don't have any graves in your city However, inform them that loving and hating for the sake of a God and showing loyalty and enmity in this manner are an essential part of faith. So as long as they do not cut ties off with the people of Zulfi and their ilk, the fact that they themselves have not worshipped other than Allah will not benefit them, nor will they have the statement La ilaha illallah. So Shaykh Islam wrote to Ahl Qasim. Again, you can see it, there's an Aqidah book, right? He's Risala to Ahl Qasim. And he told them, stay from the people of Zulfi because they're doing shirk, and you say you're upon Tawheed, so you have to disbelieve in the Taghut, right? He's saying now, Yasir Ghadi, when he wrote this statement, Ibn Abdul Wahhab, he writes that anyone who doubts the faith, his faith has left the faith. And he says that the fact that he excommunicates the entire town of Qasim simply because they have cordial ties with the neighboring town of Zulfi, the latter of whom I refuse to give allegiance. This is the clearest indication that he's a Khariji. Brothers and sisters, Ahl Qasim, why did Shaykh Islam Muhammad Wahhab have a problem with them? Not because they had connections. They connected with them, supported them, and they killed Ahl Tawheed. He's hiding that. It's in we can go back, and it's in the same books. Ibn Ghannab, Ibn Bishr, Ibn Laboon, they all mention. Ahl Qasim, they had du'at sent by his students, Ibn Abdul Wahhab. They killed them. Then they broke the covenant. Then he fought them. See, why is he hiding all this? He's making it look like there's a town out there, no qubur, no shrines, and he just came and killed them and made takfir of them. Ahl Bid'ah, brothers and sisters, why I can't just report? Because now he needs something. And second problem we have, even if this was true, is killing somebody enough to say someone's a Kharij or extremist? It's like saying Abu Bakr Siddiq fought some of the Sahaba. طيب, so what does that mean? Can someone say Abu Bakr is extreme? La hawla wa quwwata billah. The question we're going to ask, why? Why? So now we get the why. They killed the people of Tawheed. What else? They supported shirk. And what else? They didn't cut off the ties of the Tawheed after knowing that it's wrong. So therefore they fell into Ridda, which leads to another point. Shaykh Islam Muhammad Wahhab, where does he get his views about Ridda and Takfir from? From the Madahib. He's a Shaykh, right? The Hanbali Madhab, but he's a Shaykh al-Islam. The people today, the Quburiyun, they say, Ibn Abdul Wahhab is an extremist because he's doing ijtihad, no one else preceded him. Not even Ibn Taymiyyah. What's the answer to this? Ibn Taymiyyah and Shaykh Islam Abdul Wahhab are in the same boat. Same boat. Number one, Ibn Abdul Wahhab, he took his beliefs of Tawheed and Shirk from Ibn Taymiyyah. Number two, when it comes to Ridda, apostasy, wal Kufr, he takes it from the Madhab, from the Ibn Taymiyyah. Okay, it's important to know this. So Yasir Ghadi is trying to create this kind of wedge. And these are new arguments. We never heard this before, right? This is the new one. These are the new ones today. Ibn Wahhab is not the same. So let's take a look. And here's an example. Shaykh Islam, he writes, and this is cited by who? Mardawi, Kitab al-Insaf, volume 10, page 327. والمرعي كرمي and غاية المنتهى. Again, إقناع also. These are Hanbali madhabs. Ibn Hajar al-Haytami الشافعي المكي في قواطع الإسلام. They write من جعل بينه وبين الله وسائط يتوكل عليهم ويدعوهم ويسألهم كفر إجماعا. This is a madhab, right? Oh, Shaykh Salah al-Shaykh cites this. That's madhab, right? Who's Mardawi in the madhab al-Hanbalis? He's considered the muharrar al-madhab. So when Shaykh Islam Abdul Wahhab said this is kufr and shirk, did he make it up? No. What's the difference then? He did ijtihad when Ibn Taymiyyah couldn't do it because Ibn Taymiyyah didn't have the wali amr with him. Remember, brothers and sisters, Ibn Taymiyyah was in jail. They jailed him. Shaykh Islam Abdul Wahhab is unique in situation. He has the wali amr, the ruler with him. And he's Shaykh al-Islam, he did ijtihad. You can't say someone's ijtihad is invalid when he's more knowledgeable than anyone of the people talking today. What's happened today is as if we're saying his ijtihad is wrong. It's between him and Allah if you think his ijtihad was wrong, but you can't say it's not valid. He was taken from the same madhabs. It's almost like saying Ibn Abdul Wahhab is against the madhabs by citing the madhabs. Pick your poison. Which one is he? Is he with the madhabs, against the madhabs? And brothers and sisters, I want to finish by mentioning all of these points I'm saying now are very easily documented. But unfortunately in today's time, when they cut and paste, they make a big story out of this without actually looking carefully at what's happening. To summarize, to finish, inshallah, the last point, all the stories that they cite of history and all these examples, they don't prove anything. And the proof of this that most of the ulama, they're familiar with it. Yasir Ghadi says that when he was a student in Medina University, he didn't know about this. Later on, when he went to Yale, somehow he figured it out. I don't know how that works, right? You're with the ulama who are from Saudi, from the same place. But when you went to Yale, mashallah, maybe you read something, I don't know. Khalas. If you learned later, did the same ulama who you studied with not know that? They didn't read the Rusuniyya, they don't have mu'allafat Shaykh Islam Abdul Wahhab? They have it. Why did they conclude differently when you concluded? Another example, so you understand, where did they get the stories of Shaykh Islam from? His own writings, his two biographers, Ibn Ghannam or Ibn Bishr. Who are those biographers? His. He appointed them to write this tariq and this history of what's happening. How can you weaponize this history of the one who wrote it? And they're not blaming, they're actually confirming it. It's like taking, like the Orientalists, when they take the hadith to show the Quran's not preserved, from taking from our books. How do you take from our sources and come to a different conclusion? Why don't you take the sources and the conclusion? Except that somebody is sahib hawa. Brothers and sisters, sahib, people are hawa, people desires, that's what they do. They'll take what they like and they reject what they don't like. So the summary of it, all of this, brothers and sisters, should make us feel confident that a lot of the shubahat out there are not actually arguments to be worried about. And this is a summary of a big topic, inshallah ta'ala. We hope that we benefited from it. And inshallah in the future, we can go, right, people can follow the different resources and read for themselves. Otherwise, the topic is big and the ulama have written a lot about it and they spend a lot of energy on it. And we have to at least know the general points. Maybe you will not remember all of this, but you remember at least some of it. Because one day you need to tell your family members, this is Tawheed, this is Shirk. بِقُوَّةٍ Ya Yahya khudh al-kitab biquwwa, with strength. Because today if Tawheed and Shirk become wishy-washy, and what's next? What's next? See, they start with this and tomorrow they're going to say, not only Tawheed and Shirk they got wrong, hatta manhaj they're wrong. The manhaj is wrong too. And is it surprising that Shaykh, this Yasir Qadi now, he went from the Tawheed and Shirk to Asma wa Sifat as well. So he says Asma wa Sifat, the debates were not very important, they're not that big deal. The Mu'tazila were misunderstood. Mu'tazila were misunderstood. Imagine, it's these kinds of things that make us wonder. But today, we're under serious confusion only because the subject matter has been not studied by many people as in depth as they're supposed to, or maybe because, unfortunately, there's many people who are speaking about these things. Inshallah ta'ala, I don't want to take more time now. We'll end with this much. Anyone has any questions? Inshallah ta'ala, we'll take some of them. Maybe one or two, yes, brother. So the ulama, they say khawf, which is of two types then. Many types, but the one that's dangerous, khawf sir, when you fear the creation, with the belief that in something that the creation cannot do, only that which Allah is able to do. That's one. And the second, when the khawf, which is muharram, is when you leave off ibadat or do muharramat out of fear of someone, which is not allowed. But the ulama, they say that if you want to see khawf, which is the shirk one, you usually associate with some kind of shirk, either in belief or action. That's the same. Otherwise, you go to the ulama, they explain the different categories of khawf. Allahu alam. Yes, brother. Yeah, so now we said when it comes to the issue of sujood, because now bowing, sujood and ruku' are not allowed except to give them to Allah. If done to a sensei or MMA or something, it's haram. Now if someone does it, they're not going to become kafir like that because they're doing it in their culture out of greeting. So we're going to tell them it's haram, don't do it, and tell the person I'm not going to do that. But let's say someone did it with a niyyat taqarrub. I'm trying to get close to the person, this is shirk. But the most people do it, they're just doing it either because they're scared to get kicked out of the MMA, astaghfirullah, right, or something like that, or they're ignorant. And most people are like this, so we tell them it's haram, stay away from it. Okay, last question, Sheikh, yes. So we explained that Shaykh Islam Ibn Taymiyyah and Muhammad Wahhab are the same in the view. The only difference is Ibn Abdul Wahhab had a chance to act on his views with the help of the Wali Amr and do ijtihad in certain places and areas versus Ibn Taymiyyah who couldn't. Otherwise, their beliefs are the same because, as we said, he cites him and he quotes him often, both in madhab and aqeedah. So this is unfortunately a misunderstanding about him. Inshallah, we'll end with this much. Subhanakallah.